So let me just quickly introduce our panel today. So many people will know our two speakers. So Bernie O'Reilly is a member of Patients for Patient Safety Ireland and a former chairperson. Thank you, Bernie, for joining us today. It's a pleasure. And Marie Cregan, also a member of Patients for Patient Safety Ireland, and Mary's also a founder of Féileacáin. Thank you both for joining us. We've spoken on many occasions before, but I'm really happy to hear from you today and to hear your thoughts a little bit about kind of what Patients for Patient Safety Ireland is and what it does, and just your thoughts on the whole area of patient participation. So I'm going to hand over to Bernie in the first place, and Bernie.
Thank you, John, and thank you everybody who's tuned in live or will listen to the podcast in the future for allowing us to share Patients for Patient Safety with you. So Patients for Patient Safety is a WHO worldwide network, not just in Ireland, and all across the world, and it was established in 2004 with the signing of the London Declaration. It was brought to Ireland in 2013 by Margaret Murphy, and Margaret was one of the original 24 signatories to the London Declaration under the guidance of Sir Liam Donaldson, who was very empowering man and was seeing the value of the patient voice. So he appointed Margaret the external lead advisor for the WHO Patient Safety Network for the whole world. When Margaret brought it to Ireland in 2013, she created a collaboration between patients, their families, carers and the HSE. Next slide, please. So members of our group are, we're basically people with stories of harm in healthcare. It's our own stories or the story of a loved one. We share in the spirit of learning and to bring about improvement in patient safety. So we're volunteers, people from all walks of life. I live and work in the farming community, so I bring my own story with me. We feel that we all win when patients speak up. So it's our health service, and we bring knowledge. Healthcare professionals and service users bring their healthcare professionals bring their skills, and patients and service users bring their lived experience. And like each patient or service user comes with a support network, and that network are their families, their carers, and often we're the voices of the vulnerable and the voiceless. So we feel we have a part to play in patient care. Next slide, please. So we're more than the stories of harm. Like the outcomes of the harms created in our lives can't be undone. We'd love if we could have new endings to our stories. But we have to move beyond that, and we want to be active participants in building a stronger, safer, fit for purpose health service. Next slide, please. So I'm bringing you the story of my husband's death from septic shock in 2006. At the time, Tony was a healthy, athletic 50-year-old man who, by his own admission, never felt better in his life. In fact, he viewed his operation as being an inconvenience that would take him away from his farm for a few months, and then he'd eventually get back to it and he'd be as good as he had ever been. So he was having elective surgery he needed a bowel resection to remove a cancerous tumour. And there was no complications anticipated, and he fully expected to return to a normal life. The actual outcome was vastly different. He had his operation on a sunny July Monday, and within 72 hours, he was dead from septic shock. So he went from being a fit person, a very vibrant man, to his life over. And my life changed completely over in that time frame. Next slide, please. So what actually happened? Well, I'd probably never know exactly what happened, but the details I have gleaned over the years is that Tony's surgical team was he was attending a Dublin hospital, and that hospital was on call for accidents and emergencies that day, and they were slotting in elective surgeries at the same time. So a traffic accident victim arrived in the hospital, and just as Tony was about to be anaesthetised, and the surgeon had visited the accident victim and deemed him not in need of his skills at that time. So Tony's operation commenced. But about an hour into Tony's operation, the accident victim became critical, and the lead surgeon and the senior members of the team operating on my surgeon left to attend the accident victim for an undisclosed period, approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. Now, no operation took place on Tony during that time. Next slide, please. However, something happened. Tony received 4 units of blood while the surgeon wasn't there, and they returned to complete the operation. But within 24 hours, Tony was very unwell. By Wednesday lunchtime, he was in a serious condition, and his blood tests, which showed the gravity, were dismissed. They thought that the blood tests, which actually showed that his white cell count had actually practically depleted, they thought that it had come from a drip arm. So repeat blood tests were ordered, but they were not acted on in a timely manner. So what eventually happened was nobody joined the dots to, pinpoint Tony's deterioration. And by the time he just progressed through sepsis to the point of no return, and he died from septic shock. Next slide, please. So after that, we had an awful lot of questions, myself and my 18-year-old daughter, and because Tony died of sepsis, we knew that sepsis was a risk of his operation. I mean, it's a risk of everyday life. Anything can turn to sepsis. The surgeon actually conjectured that the staple gun had failed. Now, at the inquest, we thought we'd get answers. It was about a year after Tony's death, the inquest was held, and the staff just reported a normal day in a Dublin hospital and the possible malfunction of a stapling device. No one took any notice of the 2-hour gap. We always felt the 2-hour gap was an important part of the story, but nobody seemed to worry about that, only ourselves. Johnson & Johnson reacted to the fact that the staple gun, may have failed, and they tested devices from a similar batch, from the same batch, and they found them to give a normal presentation and appropriate function. So we were left with lots of questions and very few answers. The verdict of the inquest was that the cause of Tony's death was septicemia from an anastomotic leak and a defective surgical instrument. Next slide, please. So we left the inquest not knowing really what to do next, so we waited for something to happen, and nothing basically happened. So then we explored the legal route of getting answers, and that was expensive and a very worrying time for us. We were trying to cope with life without Tony. Tony was a farmer, so there was a farm to be, tended to. And when I entered into exploring the legal route, the bills started to mount up, and I just got totally afraid that we'd lose our home paying legal bills, and the outcome wasn't going to bring Tony back. So after the statute of limitations ran out, I actually wrote a letter to Mary Harney. It was kind of a desperate letter, how am I going to trust the health services again? We've experienced this awful outcome, and nobody seems to be engaging with us. So that letter actually went round for about a year, and eventually it landed on someone's desk who did something about it. And we were given an external review. But now that process took about 2 years, and I'm very grateful for it, but it was so long after Tony's death that a lot of people had moved on. So I didn't get a lot of answers from the external review. The only thing I did find out was there had been an initial draft report done immediately after Tony's death, but it stayed in draft form. It never actually got acted upon. So all that, the external review fed into me being put in touch with the Patient Safety Network and Margaret Murphy and her group of patient voices, patient champions. And it's been varied. I've had some great opportunities, a chance to understand how our health system works, its strengths, its weaknesses. Sometimes I found in the past I used to take on too much and get overwhelmed. Sometimes I'm out of my depth. I'm a layperson in a world of academics and healthcare professionals, but maybe people need to hear our stories and feel unsettled and work for better outcomes. And we need to see the good works and the challenges and challenge the system that fails people. So the things I've been involved in since I joined the group in 2015, like sepsis awareness would be would be a huge motivator for me. There's been brilliant work done on sepsis, but like it's something it's going to be with us always. We're always going to have to be aware of it and keep it out front, and always be aware and conscious of it. Open disclosure, honestly, how we engage with people after instance, just how we treat people. Infection prevention and control. It's such an important part of healthcare. Like, I suppose in the last couple of years with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's actually brought infection prevention and control into everybody's mind. I would have been on an effort, not the current effort, which would have been massively challenging for lay people to be involved in. It was massively challenging for professional people to be involved in, because it's been so long and so intense. I've involved myself in various groups, Safe Site Surgery Group. I'm on the HSE, one of the HSE committees, on the People and Culture Committee. Some very interesting stuff I've become involved in recently, which would be the Eye Sympathy Project, which is about reviews for people on 10 or more medications. So it's a really good project, and I hope it has a life beyond its funded. It's funded until 2023, but hopefully a business case will be made that it will be extended beyond that period. So patient engagement framework group, that's looking into how patient engagement, the importance of patient engagement, and measuring how much of it is already in existence, and trying to actually extend the good work and make it part of our health service. Apart from that, I present my story at conferences, and I tune into webinars and things that are of interest to me and our group in general. I was secretary for a while, and I was the group chairperson. So that's more or less what I've been involved in. Thank you.
And thank you, Bernie, and thank you for all of those things that you do, and thank you for all of the work that we've been involved in together, and it's been invaluable to work with you and Patients for Patient Safety Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
I'm gonna hand over to Mary. Maybe if Mary wants to tell us a little bit about her involvement with Patients for Patient Safety Ireland, and maybe to start a little bit about herself as well.
Oh, hi, everyone. And Bernie, you're always a hard act to follow. But I'll just give a little bit about my story. And I joined Patient for Patient Safety because I was the current chairperson at the time, I still am, of Féileacáin, which is the Stillbirth and Neonatal Death Association. And that was following the death of my daughter. She died as a stillbirth, actually. She was just before she was due. And I couldn't get over the fact that there was so little support there. And I'd be a social worker by trade. I was working in the mental health services at the time, and couldn't believe there was nothing there. And we formed Féileacáin, a group of us whose babies had died. And because we were so traumatized by this loss, and we couldn't understand how no one else got it. And we were working so hard at getting nowhere, really trying to get people to listen to us. And then I heard Margaret and Murphy talk about Patient for Patient Safety Ireland, and I actually went to one of their meetings and joined, because what I saw was that people were actually listening to patients through that forum. So I've just put on the slides there that listening and hearing patients makes a difference in high quality care. We all know this. We all know that reducing harm, that this reduces harm, promotes healing. We know that patients can often feel so powerless, and that's patients especially who have been bereaved, or their families who have been bereaved, or patients who are facing death. And we still don't bother the doctor syndrome in Ireland, where we won't ask questions because we still feel powerless. And this is why I think that we are listening to patients, and we have patients advocates, that it makes the medical profession, the social workers, whoever is working with people who are vulnerable, it makes us more aware of how we present, and something that's so common to us and maybe highly charged situations that we do every day, we don't sometimes realise the impact that we will have on patients. The example I've just put in there I was using is my sister. I reared my sister after her mother died, and she was a woman, a girl who just loved life, and a woman grew into a woman who loved life. And she was a bit of a pup, really, and they'd know her well in the CUH. And she ended up anyway on dialysis when she was a teenager. She had 2 transplants, but she was a girl who internet was just happening, and she went on the internet and learned so much about her condition that they actually asked her opinion about her treatment in the team that was caring for her, and she was a true partner in how she looked after herself. Now, I knew she was doing that because she was pushing her life to the end. In other words, she wanted to see how many Jaeger bombs she could have at a weekend, as teenagers or young women do. But they probably thought she was trying to keep herself as healthy as possible. What she was doing was to see, how she could push her creatinine levels and all of that, so that she could get the best life she could. But sadly, she died in the end. And one of the, I felt so looked after by her team, so cared for. I really felt as if they had lost somebody as well. But then, just before she died, it was at a weekend, and one of the consultants who was on call called me out of her room and said, your sister will die tonight. And I kind of knew that, but he said, and we have to have a post-mortem. And they discussed her post-mortem outside the doorway of her little cubicle where she was still alive. And that has had such an enormous impact on me. Now, that consultant rocked up to work that day to do a good day's work, which he does. He's a very kind man. But that, I suppose, if you were listening to patients' voices, they would tell you this is something you never do when someone who is facing the loss of someone that they love so much. And that's one of the reasons, I suppose, that I got involved in patient safety too, is to listen to the impact that we have when we're working with people who are vulnerable. The next slide, please. I suppose our stories, as Bernie said, don't change. Like we were harmed. My baby died, my grandson died, my other daughter died, and my sister died. But how we understand them does change, and that makes an awful difference if there's partnership and care. Like when we're bereaved and when we're harmed by the system, we can recover a lot faster, or we can actually cope with it if somebody is kind to us, if they're compassionate, if they're honest, and if they work with us. Again, as I said, why Patient for Patient Safety Ireland? For me, was when I went to the first meeting and saw that it was actually part of the quality improvement division of the HSE, that people were listening. And as you know, when we lose somebody tragically, or when we are impacted by a death, that a lot of people, parents, siblings, whatever, will form an organisation afterwards it's one way of them coping with their grieving. And I suppose when we formed Féileacáin, the impression I was getting from those we were trying to get to listen to us was they thought maybe this is just another group that may not last. A lot of groups begin, but they do maybe one, they're ad hoc, they do one piece and then they finish. But we were there for the long haul, as anyone that knows us will know we are. And then I could see that actually this concept of partnership, that if we were part of Patient Safety Ireland, so I'm outing myself here now for the other patient safety champions, I did go into it to see would people start listening to us about infant death. We were standing on the shoulders of others, really, and Bernie has said that about Margaret, that the groundwork had been done. People had listened to Margaret and what happened to her and her child. And all of us have been harmed in some way by our treatment in the service, but we've also witnessed really good care. We have seen how it should be and how it could be, and I know that listening to patients works, because sadly 14 days and 14 years after my daughter died, my other daughter Aoife lost her little boy Dara, and it was such a different experience because the services had moved on. The care she got, the compassion, the way it was looked after, and of course there are improvements always, and we're not backwards and coming forwards with all of those in Féileacáin, but we did see that people had listened to parents, and it only makes the experience better. Next slide, please. The context of patient involvement then was touched briefly by Bernie, that sometimes, that if you're listening to patients and they're asking for something that can't be there, like patients are listened to along with policymakers, along with people who are delivering service, and it might be great in practice, but how can we get it to work in theory if there's a huge money message attached to it? And I think that that's probably one of the barriers, is that if we listen to patients, and maybe sometimes they want things that that we see are impossible to grant, but like Alice in Wonderland, we have to dream about and believe 6 impossible things every day before breakfast. The other issue is involving parents. Then you have to have a readiness to listen. There's no point in talking as a patient if there's no one to listen to you, and you have to have a readiness to engage and change yourself. And that's, as any professional, that unless we are ready to listen direction and to move. And then we have to have a team to support us, because the people we listen to in the services are our bosses, are the policymakers, because, you know, they're the ones that are driving us, and the caseloads are hard and all of that. So there has to be, I think, more of it started, it is there, and there has to be more appropriate representation. Next slide, please. Sometimes then the feedback we give, it can be hard to hear. There's vulnerabilities in our service. It can be hard for us to hear that what we thought we were doing very well, but maybe we weren't doing so well, and that, you know, the unintended consequences of something we've done has upset somebody. But I think clinicians as well, and we've seen this with open disclosure, they need to be empowered to become partners with patients too. Like, there has to be a proper space for it. It can't just be, you know, in this hospital we do it this way, in that hospital we do it the other way. And from working in Féileacáin, I can't believe, even though we're supposed to have standardised care in so many ways, like, we don't, you know, and we're not a big country. Like, we're only the size of a borough of London, really, and we still have a lot of different of ways of doing things. And that's okay if it's, you know, tailored to that area, that a rural hospital can't deliver the same as a very high-tech urban hospital, but that there must be an expectation of a certain standard. And then again, I brought up about sharing knowledge. The day of the passive patient is gone. I hear at the support meetings in Féileacáin, the young fathers talk about parts of their wives' and partners' bodies that I didn't even know I had years ago. And they know now what's going on. And when something goes wrong, patients will go and inform themselves of it. And if, you know, this can only help us if we share this knowledge. Next slide, please. Okay, that was it. Sorry about that, guys. But I suppose my message would be that, you know, we don't always like what patients have to say. And I think we have a situation where we encourage more the negative say. You know, have your say usually is tell us what went wrong. We also have to tell what goes right, because there is so much that goes right out there, and a lot of that I can see of practitioners, a lot of professionals working in the area are feeling just that little bit disempowered because nobody tells them, actually, you did an amazing job. And we all know that how many times we're going to say, God, I'm going to ring them and tell them that was great. We don't, but if it was bad, I'd tell you, I'll be on the phone before I'm even, you know, outside the door. So maybe we need to look at that as well. Tell us what went right today. And thank you for listening.
Thanks, Mary, and thank you as well. Thank you both, you know, for the generosity, not only of your stories, but of yourselves, and all that you've been doing. I suppose I'm just going to open up the conversation a little bit. I can see some questions coming through, and I'd invite people to post some questions. But you know, I suppose for both of you, you know, your experiences maybe demonstrated the absence of partnership certainly at times in your stories, and I think that, you know, that there's obviously a lot that can be done to fix that. But you probably also seen really good examples of partnership, you know, in your work with Patients for Patient Safety Ireland, and I might ask Bernie just first, you know, where have you seen that at its best, Bernie? Where have you seen patient partnership really work?
I had to do a little bit of research to kind of feed in some information to the patient framework, the roadmap for engaging with patients. And I contacted someone in Enable Ireland, and my God, I was so impressed with how they work with their service users. Like, it really is person-centered. Like, they have massive contact with the whole support network around each service user, and they really do go above and beyond to meet the needs of their service users. So that would be a really, for me, it was actually, I was so pleased to hear. I thought, let's grow this, like let this be more the experience of everybody.
And what is it that they do, or, you know, what kind of, how do they do it?
Well, I just think they, like, not only do they talk to the service user themselves, and like sometimes the service user, like I know one lady I spoke to, she said, well, if you ask Brian, does he want to eat out every day of the week, he'll say yes, like, but that mightn't be in Brian's interest. So they include the families, you know, they go, they take the feedback from the family, who often, you know, if you've got somebody with serious disabilities, the family who are close to them, who've been with them their whole lives, will actually know their needs better than maybe the service users themselves in an instance. So to kind of take a whole picture of everybody's
Yeah.
input, not just a little piece of the story, the whole story.
Yeah, thanks. And Mary, have you seen, examples of really good engagement and partnership?
Yeah, it's usually in the bereavement services, and especially in the bereavement of babies who've died neonatally or perinatally. And I've seen just huge changes where they have listened to the parents. And I come from an age group, as you can see, that where the idea was, forget about it, go on, but forget about it immediately. And now that we have, we've moved so far away from that parents can see the beauty of what happens. Now, at the time, these aren't the words you use to them, or you would be very bruised indeed. But that they have an experience that is good enough, not everyone, of course, but that's good enough at the time that they can remember some of the good things. But if you have a bad experience and that there was no good in it whatsoever, you are never going to get over that, as we say, or get through it. But when you have other things to think of, it really is. I've seen just huge strides in listening, but it hasn't come easy. We've had to fight, and also I would see that it's not seen as it's not up there where it should be. That we really still are medically driven, and we fix things, and it's there's really, I don't know, I suppose very active treatments for certain things, but once it's all over, then it's all over for some people's and they don't realize it's actually just starting for others and for the families. If that's making sense, maybe a bit garbled there now, but I have seen, yeah, huge improvements.
Yeah, no, it makes lots of sense. And I think one of the questions I'm just looking at here that's come in is about the language that we use. And I think language is so important in this whole area. Even, what do we call people? Do we call them people or patients or
Mm.
partners or service users? And, and I think, one sometimes there's not really an answer to that. It's just to acknowledge that finding the right language is difficult. Yeah, and one of the questions here is about how do we simplify the language? Do you think we need to simplify the language, or do we need to create time, to talk?
But sometimes, we talk too much. That we
Okay.
don't wait to see, if somebody's in stress, that they think either very, very quickly or they think very slowly, and we have to match our language to that. And if they're very stressed or if they're just completely in shock and they can't move. And we have to match our language, our body language, even our breathing. We breathe more slowly, they'll kind of copy us. An awful lot of research out there about that now. And sometimes just don't talk, wait and see, give them a chance. But we don't. We go in, we've a checklist to do. We have to do this, and this. I tick the box, yeah, she's grand, good luck. And that's not, patients then go, what happened there? We'd often hear this in patient safety, especially around coroners and things like that. And we often hear about it, especially in perinatal death. So sometimes don't talk and wait and see. And, a simple touch. And I know we're getting into all sorts of things then, so we're terrified now of everything. But sometimes don't talk. And also we have to remember that people have different the people speak differently, I mean, I speak totally differently than my younger kids now, and we have to be get with the program and get with the vernacular, and also to remember what the words and some of the connotations we have. I think there's a big argument out there now that you never say passed away, you say died, and some people thought that that was too strong a word when they heard your father has died, but at least you know exactly what has happened. So I hope that's answering your question. Sometimes just say less, not like me now, but
Yeah. And Bernie, do you think that's important? I mean, how do we work with patients to learn about communication and language and talking to people to really figure out what matters to people, that the health service is for everyone.
Well, I think if people are at their ease, they kind of become they become more open to engaging better. Like I think sometimes we're nervous of engaging with professionals because sometimes we think they've all the answers, but they mightn't be necessarily telling us in our language. So I think you have to kind of bring yourself back to levels of kind of compassion and engaging with people in a simpler way, like, and not
Yeah.
make people feel disempowered by the fact that they might know a lot less than you know. I think some people are intimidated by not having a massive knowledge base, but I think people read how you treat them. Like they read how you try and speak to them in their own language.
Yeah, and when we can get to that point, then there's real communication, I think, at that point, isn't there? And
Well, I think like if you like, I suppose it goes back to something we were maybe discussed earlier on, that like the health service used to serve people, but you kind of, for the health service to grow, you have to move away from serving people. You want to involve people so that they're automatically more open to the advice you're giving them, and they want to actually take the advice and use the advice and work with you, rather than you're kind of serving them, you're telling them what to do, but they might engage with you as well. They need to feel part of it to actually take on board those messages.
yeah, and another question here is about, how do we address those negative perceptions of the health service, are things that are not even perceptions, things that are seen that are clearly negative. How do we make it easy for people to speak up and for that to be heard, and then for that, yeah, for patients to have some input into how those problems are addressed?
Well, I think you just have to be totally transparent, and I think when things go wrong, you have to really just be very open. Like I think you have to go beyond the apology. You have to kind of go to the next level and say, like, well, this is wrong, like, and maybe say this is how we plan to sort it out. Like, I mean, this, like, I think when the health service gets a bit of bad publicity, it's usually a catastrophic bad publicity. They're never small. They're never small events. Like, they're always big events that just rattle the whole community.
Yeah,
I mean, what
yeah.
happened in CAMS recently? I mean, that knocked so many services. Really gave services a knock back, and think, well, that could happen in our service, and like we're worried about that.
And we see the headlines only. That people see the headlines and then we get scared, because especially in the last couple of years, people are living, their lives maybe from a fear base anyway, and we don't understand it wasn't all bad. I mean, when we see or we don't understand how it came to be here, and the people who are working in the services, then it is just so deeply unfair for those who have gone over and beyond. And we all know that anyone that's working in the services will know that most of us do our really, really best, and sometimes like we're looking at the biggest, creakiest ship going, that you'd wonder how anything gets done. And then there are pockets of such excellence of care, but nobody talks about them, and they're not replicated. So I don't know. We need to start telling people though the good stuff as well. But we love the bad story in Ireland.
I suppose there's another question there, just about, how do you tell this engagement is authentic? I suppose there's a recognition now within the health services that it's very important to ask patients, to partner with patients, but that can sometimes be seen as just a tick box exercise, that we're doing it just to say that we've done it. But how do you know when there's really authentic partnership happening?
And things change.
Yeah.
On a policy level, development level, things change. On a personal level, which is what most of us here would be operating from, is when you're down, when you're upset, when you're traumatized, your bullshit radar is quite high, and that you will find, that you will see. And also maybe we're asking too much of some clinicians. We're not all comfortable with, people can be brilliant surgeons, but that they're just very shy, or they're very maybe, I don't want to use the word inept socially, but you know what I mean. So we need to see that this is a really, really, that he or she is an amazing surgeon, but when she's giving the diagnosis to her patient, or he is giving it to his patient, then maybe somebody needs to be with him, another person who will actually say, what Dr. So-and-so is trying to tell you is, have you questions for him or her? But we we're not all things to all people, and there's a bit of an expectation of that you can be a really good surgeon, but we want you to be really good as well at putting people at their ease. And so I just think it's it's a team approach.
Yeah, so working together, everybody. Bernie, any thoughts on that one?
No, I think Mary now fairly well summed that up.
So we're getting close to the time, but I suppose, can I just ask you, I suppose, two questions together in one sense, is what has surprised you, being involved in Patients for Patient Safety Ireland, and maybe along with that, I would say, what would you say to somebody who was thinking of becoming involved with Patients for Patient Safety Ireland? What reasons would you give them for getting involved?
Well, I suppose I came into the group with a total level of mistrust for healthcare professionals, and I suppose I've swung the other direction now. I'm I mostly see good stuff. I see, as and Mary has said this, that sometimes we bear witness to all the good that's going on, and some of the time, sometimes when we get involved in things, we're out of our depth in our knowledge base, and sometimes we are just observers of the hard work of other people.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing I'm glad to have got my confidence restored in healthcare, because it's a very difficult position for a patient to be in if you don't trust the service or the healthcare professional that you're dealing with. That you're in a very if you're already vulnerable, you're actually even more vulnerable if you don't trust the service that you're handing yourself over to. So for me, I needed to find that trust again. And then I suppose when my daughter got involved in healthcare, I started to kind of I listened to her worries, and I know that the worst thing in her life would be if she harmed a person. And I think that is the case with all healthcare workers. Their worst nightmare is if they harm a patient. And I suppose I've gotten a better understanding of the human frailties of fear and failure. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mary?
Things go wrong in every, I mean, things went wrong in Apollo, whatever it was, things go wrong all the time. And we expect that there's no risk anymore, but there is, of course, there's always risk, and we can't eliminate it. But it's how we handle it, I think, is what's important. And what I've seen from, again, like Bernie said, that I've gone to be part of groups where I was the patient rep and I actually was the village idiot, that I sat there, they'd ask me, and I had absolutely nothing to say about whether the blood should be stored here, what it should be. But what I saw were professionals who took time out of really busy days. They worked at 6 o'clock, they worked, the meetings were never at a convenient time for an office hours, they were always in the evening. And I just saw the work that they did and said, there's so much right with our service. There's so much right with the when we respond to something that has gone wrong, that a guideline is then set up to make sure that this will never happen again, and we've done our best to reduce the risk. But that's not out there, and I think maybe that's why people are so distrustful of the service, that it's, and also this kind of idea of the minute something is thrown at the HSE, they go to defend and deny, and maybe I'm being very harsh there, but there could be another way maybe of looking at things, because if you don't trust your system, your health system, and it's all our health system, well, it makes things worse. You're more vulnerable.
Great. Well, thank you both very much. Just last word to you both. Would you recommend to people getting involved in Patients for Patient Safety Ireland if as a patient you want to change and influence patient safety? Is it a good place to go?
Well, I'd definitely still be in my place of mistrust if I hadn't got involved, and
Yeah.
I just have a better understanding of our health service, its frailties and all its good outcomes and good inputs as well.
It certainly helped us hugely in any of the work we've done, bereavement care or in maternity services. So I'd say, yeah.
Well, thank you both. There's a whole other conversation going on there in the chat, and lots of good ideas and suggestions of things that help communication and help create partnerships. So from Mila there, what worked well, what are the challenges, what could we do better the next time? So simple kind of little question structures and things. The Hemingway app, people are pointing to lots of different ideas, and we could keep talking, couldn't we? I mean, there's so much to talk about here, and I hope that we will get to cover some more of these issues in some of the webinars in the weeks and months ahead. Bernie and Mary, thank you so much for joining me. I'm just going to kind of close out now and just let people know about the next session. So yeah, first of all, please, again, we appeal all the time, just please do sign up to the QPS Ireland Network Map. Let us know where you are, what you're doing, and to kind of get on the map. That's the key thing now, so that we can connect everybody in the country. And then alongside that, again, we're appealing to people to join the Q community, which is a community of folks, healthcare workers, interested in improving healthcare across Ireland and the UK, and in particular in Northern Ireland. So we have a very strong community across the island now that we're trying to build up. So please look for some information there from Caroline Nenanali. Her email is there, and we would really encourage people to join Q and to join the community. And finally, just to put these dates in your diary. So again, we're going to really continue the theme of today in a couple of weeks' time with our colleagues from the HSE, Mila Whelan and Lawler, Nicola Williams, and the HSE National Patient and Service Users Forum, talking about, you know, some of the things we've started talking about today is what is meaningful partnership, and how do we get it, and what's needed to support it. And then on the 22nd of March, my colleague from Temple Street is Dr. Rob Cunningham. He'll be talking about liberating structures, which is a great way for engaging staff in improvement ideas, and bringing people along, and really getting everybody's ideas out. So please put those in the diary, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time. And so finally, just as you close the session today, you'll get a little pop-up just with a short questionnaire as to how you found the session today, and looking for some ideas as to what we could do better, and maybe for future sessions that would be of interest to you. So thank you once again to Bernie and Mary, and we look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks' time.